I want to start with uplifting words from President Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address in 1861, words that contain the title of my sermon. We are not enemies, but friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. Friends, no matter how divided and demoralized our country is during this season of a ravaging pandemic, compounded by savage racial oppression and economic inequities, despite all that, we Americans are summoned to appeal to the better angels of our nature. As Sikh author, filmmaker, and civil rights activist Valerie Kaur puts it in her brand new superlative book, If You Get No Volume the rest of 2020, I invite you to connect with See No Stranger, a memoir of and manifesto of revolutionary love, where Valerie writes, we must choose to enter into wonder and grieving and labor for others, for our opponents. She intentionally uses the term opponent rather than enemy. For others, for opponents, and for ourselves. In order to transform the world around us, we need to see more and more kinds of people as part of us, or parts of us we do not yet know. They are our siblings. Or as the Jewish sage of yesteryear, Hillel, claimed, if I'm not for myself, who will be? If I'm only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? Friends, each of us is a partial shareholder for a short time on a tiny corner of the planet. And our primary mission is to become responsible and caring stewards from birth until death. That's all we have to be and do. Become responsible and caring stewards of the earth during our lifetimes. That's our job description, and all of our names are on it. And when we fall backwards or slump sideways, we can turn to the guidance and grounding of our Unitarian Universalism. For me, there are four words that capture the core of our progressive faith: an ever-evolving love. An ever-evolving love. I believe that this phrase will enable us to embody the better angels of our nature as we struggle to reshape the soul of America. Now is the time to go to our chosen faith for help. We understandably often turn to politics, science, and sociology, but we sometimes forget to turn to our own religion for strength and direction. So I'm going to preach a portion of our brand of theology today, because I want us to remember who we truly are and where we've come from historically and spiritually as Tapestrians. The Unitarian emphasis is the rallying cry of the 16th century Transylvanian pioneer Francis David, Semper Reformanda, or always reforming. And remember, this dictate charges us to both change external reality and be changed internally, reforming and being reformed all the way home, ever-evolving creations. In those days, religion was a matter of life and death, with formal public debates being held regularly, in this specific case between a defender of the Trinity, Peter Melius, and the advocate of the unity of God, Francis David. And their fierce dispute ran for 10 days, starting at 5 a.m. each morning. Placed in perspective, on good days, pre-pandemic, 5 a.m. might be the time I arise to go to the gym for a workout, but hardly bounding up to engage in theological discourse. It took 2 days merely to establish the ground rules for the Melius-David confrontation. And before the contest, Melius said to David, "If I win this debate, you will be executed." David calmly retorted, "And if I win this debate, you and everyone else in this land will be given the religious freedom and tolerance due every human being." What an earth-shaking variance in theology, one desperately needed today, where dogmatism and bigotry create massive divisions in our own homeland. Fortunately, David won, and many were converted to Unitarianism, including John Sigismund, the king, who immediately issued the Western world's first edict of religious toleration in 1568. But sadly, the period of religious openness was short-lived. For Sigismund, a frail but noble monarch, died 3 years later in 1571. And a repressive emperor followed and dismissed David as a court preacher and imposed censorship against any form of religious free thought. And since David was considered an unrepentant innovator, he was banished to the dungeon, where he died in 1579 and was buried in an unmarked grave. So, my religious siblings, the core doctrine of our Unitarian side is semper reformanda, always reforming and being reformed. It means that you and I can evolve, grow, and change spiritually all our days and nights on earth. Here's a personal example. In my men's work since 1973, I've invariably employed as shorthand the self-identification of WHAM, W-H-A-A-M-M. That is, white, heterosexual, Anglo-Saxon, able-bodied, middle-class male. And as a member of WHAM, I've been a lifelong carrier of unearned privilege and power, and must daily labor to dismantle my very own condition. And so I've added ER, or ever reforming, semper reformanda, to become a whammer, trying to bring my practices and preachments into healthier moral alignment. And so I'm pledging, as are other self-identified males, to practice the messy, endless labor of dismantling all injustices that keep us on top and whamming away. As a card-carrying Unitarian Universalist, I'm pledging to become a whammer all the way to my grave. Semper reformanda. And our Universalist core comes from Reverend John Murray's first sermon on American soil in 1770, some 250 years ago, this very year. He said, "Give them not hell, but hope and courage, and preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." As a Universalist, I believe that every living being is welcomed into existence via everlasting love and returns upon death to the embrace of that same reality. And so during our lifetimes, we're impelled to become hopeful and courageous practitioners of love. Loved, we love in return. An ever-evolving love. That's our Unitarian Universalist gospel, and our mission is to live by and live through and live inside it. Now remember, an ever-evolving love will emerge only gradually and often with real difficulty. As colleague Alma Crawford astutely remarks, in our tradition, discomfort, like prayer and fasting and yoga, discomfort is a spiritual discipline. So I don't want to fool anybody this morning. You and I have chosen a faith of immense difficulty and discomfort. We're called to do hard. Remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s classic statement from the Birmingham jail in 1963. only several pages long. If you've never read it, locate it and read it. It was composed during his 11 days in a jail cell with no speechwriter by his side. And here's but a patch. There is a strangely irrational notion, says King, that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills. Actually, time can be used either destructively or constructively. Human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of people willing to be co-workers with the creation. King's words are not only relevant for our ever-evolving anti-racism work as Unitarian Universalists, which we've aptly called Journey Toward Wholeness, but also prove useful for every personal, social, spiritual, and political struggle in which we humans are currently embroiled. Time is neutral. It's what we do with our time that matters. And Semper Reformanda means growing and reforming both self and society on and on and on until we die, mid-path, incomplete, and unfinished practitioners of an ever-evolving love. To be sure, as a homestretch elder, as a whammer, my seasons are numbered, yet they remain filled with growing faith, hope, and love. Despite our 400 plus years of virulent, intractable racism, America's original sin, I perceive glimmers of promise. How about you? I mean, the protests through America and abroad in response to the brutal murder of African-American George Floyd have been essentially peaceful and purposeful. And they're not only transpiring in cities, but in rural communities as well. And people in other countries are marching on behalf of greater human rights in America. Surfers, med students here in laid-back San Diego, surfers and med students and skateboarders and corporate lawyers are joining hands for greater police reform in our laid-back city of San Diego. You see, this new activist generation, as John Lewis would say, is signing on as lifers in hot and deep pursuit of forging once and for all a multiracial democracy. And the soul, if this grizzled civil rights veteran, where my very life was changed when marching in Selma back in 1965. My soul is surging with positivity as these fresh troops of moral lieutenants are fighting anti-blackness with righteous rage. Yes, our brand of religion aspires to heed the good, necessary trouble of Brother John Lewis and Sister Opal Tometi, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter movement. When Carolyn and I went back to Birmingham and to Selma for the 50th anniversary of the march, we heard Opal Tometi speak. She's in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. And after we heard her, I said to Carolyn, we can go now. We can turn it over to the Opal Tometis of America. And within the span of 1 week recently, there was more hopeful news of the first in a series of lawsuits siding with Standing Rock tribal sovereignty in opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline, plus surprising Supreme Court support of rights of dreamers and LGBTQIA plus folks. Tiny, awkward steps to be sure, but steps forward toward greater justice and joy. Semper Reformanda. And there's more good news to report. Our granddaughter, Karen, currently teaching ESL in South Korea, is waking up as well. And here's been a portion of the passionate letter she penned after the most recent police murders of Black Americans. Hey, Graham. Hey, Graham and Gramp. Why haven't I been outraged my entire life? It's taken me 22 years to discover the verb in activism. It's a word that requires action. It's taken me this long to find that being an ally isn't synonymous with being non-racist. And all I can really say to these realizations is thank goodness it didn't take me a moment longer. 2020 will be the year that we woke up. I'll be home sooner than we know. I love you so much. Corinne. Our dear granddaughter, your fearlessness is palpable. We can feel your steadfast devotion toward restructuring the soul of your native soil. And Corinne, don't apologize ever for getting the truth at the age of 22. It matters not when you get it. Take it all the way home. John Lewis was 21 when he signed on as one of the original freedom riders. And then he spent 34 years as a conscience of Congress and was writing legislation to secure voters' rights the very week before he died at the age of 80. Corinne, become a lifer for greater freedom and justice like Brother John. Ever onward, semper reformanda. So we've got hordes of new fiery activists, but the question persists. How can a white male geezer contribute? Well, for starters, I can listen empathically to BIPOC siblings, heeding what they specifically want and need. I can also participate in our UUA-sponsored Beloved Conversations series, which perhaps you've had at Tapestry. In occasions, painful yet substantive discussions about race, open-hearted, open-minded. And when the right moment calls, I can answer by being a bold and brave, white, anti-racist ally, accomplice, and advocate rather than a guy simply laden with guilt and fragility. Remember, our 19th century Unitarian preacher and abolitionist, our guy, Theodore Parker, talked about the moral arc of the universe bending toward justice. But folks, I'm not presumptuous enough to believe that it will do so without tons of human bending and defending and mending and extending of that same arc, a lifetime's worth to be sure. It's unlikely that we're going to return to physical, economic, or medical normalcy soon, or maybe ever. But might this just be the golden opportunity, the moment, the apocalyptic moment for us to create the theme of this month, creation, to create a new moral state, a new moral order of increasing mercy and justice for all. Might we finally address climate change and global warming? Might this apocalyptic moment motivate us to work to save ourselves from ourselves? Or will we carelessly succumb to oppression of the least and the lost and the last among us? And so I keep returning to these four words: an ever-evolving love. That's our gospel. And despite our imperfections, we can keep on ever loving. Love begets love. Loved, we love in return. Plain and simple. That's why we're here on earth. In closing, I want to sing one of our signature chants, composed by Rebecca Parker, the words, and Beth Norton, the music, a simple song which captures the soul of our UU gospel. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love.